Okay. I'm trying this again. I filmed this earlier and I didn't like how it came out. I feel like I wandered off on too many of my points. So, trying this again. What do I have today? Today, I'm going to cover Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, for me, I have this on Kindle. I know. Of all the books that I like, it's shocking that I don't have a physical copy, but it is what it is. I think the first time I read this book, I borrowed it from a guy at school. So I've never owned the copy, but I did read it. I read all of them. Great books. I have some of them. I have some of them. I'll get to those later. Let's start with the recommendation. What am I going to give it? 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5. And here's why. I think for what it gives, for where the greatness is, I don't think a casual can appreciate it, right? Us readers can. If you're a reader, someone who loves books, I think you'll enjoy this even if it's not your typical genre. If you don't like sci-fi, right? If it's not your typical genre, you will enjoy this book. But it's too it's too nuanced for a casual, right? The Hobbit, the overall audience, everyone on Earth, right? Those normies who don't read, they can appreciate The Hobbit. They can't, they won't appreciate this book. So, 4 out of 5. Personally, to me, this is a top 5 book, right? I haven't done my list. I haven't done my list of top 10, top 5, but I'll get there. But this is top 5 for me. I think we kind of know what'll be, in this. We know Lord of the Rings, right? But I got some others in there you might not think. I got some others. I got some stuff. Maybe I overhyped it. Okay, so the book starts, and the one thing about it, I think the thing that makes it so great, I've read it a couple of times, I've listened to the audiobook. I think the thing that makes it so great, where Frank Herbert's genius really is in diction, right? Is in his use of words. This isn't so much prose, right? It's not pretty, flowery writing. He's not drab, it's not technical. But it's his use of the actual words to get so much done so quickly that allows him to cover such dense material so efficiently, right? I think this is why this is such a beloved book, on top of the themes that carry throughout. This diction, this ability for diction. And what do I mean by that, right? Well, we'll start at the very beginning. First off, he has no prologue, right? There's no preface, no this is this little bit, your boy don't read but at chapter 1. So I already appreciate this. I already like it. But he starts with a little quote. You know how some of these fantasy books will give you quotes from fictional books to add realism. He starts with one of these. Now, I typically don't like this. I don't like this as a trope, right? But why? Why don't I like it? I don't like it because they don't carry it through, right? If Gandalf is giving a quote at the beginning of every chapter, I know the character, right? You read a book and you get a sense. That sense is the author's job, is to give me that sense. If he fails in that sense, and somewhere along the way is not up to the standard that I should anticipate, then it's failed, right? And you lose verisimilitude, right? That feel for the giving into the story to enjoy it, right? And this is what a lot of authors do. Something in the way they structure it, something in a word that they use, in how they place it. Some of them try and get too smart, and they lose they lose the plot, so to speak. And then it becomes this weight that the rest of the story has to overcome, and sometimes they can't. Here, he doesn't have that problem. Here, he starts his Mad Weaver skill on you instantly, right? So it's a quote from what is it? The Manual of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulian, right? That's already great. I already like that. Again, diction. I'm using Muad'Dib, Princess Irulian. One of them sounds Arabic. Muad'Dib sounds Arabic. The Princess Irulian maybe sounds Russian. How are they mixing, right? And then by diction, right? Hold on. No, I'm getting ahead of myself again. Oh my god. So I'm like, why does this quote work and others don't? I'll give you a little example. Do not be deceived by the fact that he was born on Caladan and lived his first 15 years there. Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, is forever his place. You see? That sounds like this princess. I don't know. I know nothing of this book, right? Just that it's Princess Irulian. That sounds right. Why? The planet known as Dune. She doesn't say the planet Dune. This extra embellishment. These commas, Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, is forever his place. There's a bit of poetry to it. Because she's educated. A princess is smart. They're educated. They're trained. They they have public speaking ability, right? They're used to people listening to what they say. Sometimes they can be a little long-winded royalty, but it's long-winded on purpose, right? They're so deep in politics. Everything they do matters so much that they start getting bigger points across than just casual conversation like normies have, right? And so I feel the weight, the royalty in this quote, right? But it's not just a quote. The diction here, the diction that we have is his world building at the same time as it's this character building. At the same time I'm judging these words, I'm judging him as to whether these words are words a princess would say. At the same time I'm doing that, which he knows I'll do, he's feeding me the world that I'm walking into. He's just sucking me in without even me knowing it. This little section right at the beginning, and another thing, it's right. The page is all the words on the page. It's smaller. It's blocked off like a quote should be. He does this a lot too. When he says Arrakis, Dune, desert planet. When he says Gamja Bar. When he says Bene Gesserit. He italicizes these words, right? He changes the visual of what's on the page, right? But he uses words like Bene Gesserit, Muad'Dib, Padasha Emperor Saddam, right? Arrakis, Caladan, Dune, right? Caladan sounds European, right? Maybe like coast of Spain or something like this. But Bene Gesserit sounds Latin, Portuguese, religious. Muad'Dib, again, Arabic. I already think sand, the Sahara Desert, Lawrence of Arabia. All those. It's like he knows the references your brain has for words, and how, without him having to say those words, you're going to pull those words in when you read these. That's the diction he uses. That's the ability he has. And he uses it throughout this whole book, non-stop, right? It makes Everything's so dense, so rich. Um, Arrakis sounds like arachnid, right? It sounds insect almost, insectoid. And if you look at bugs, right, the image of bugs in your head, they always look like aliens. They always look out of this world, fantastical, right? So it's not just realism I'm bringing. This is on a planet, but boom, space. I already think space, right? He's doing all this just with one paragraph. He got me interested in, multiple different things. Actual interest. Those words sound cool. I want to know what Muad'Dib is. I want to know Bene Gesserit. There's a princess. When has that ever heard a story? Adding a princess, right? So we're almost pre-charged. Then we walk into the story. We meet our main character, Paul Atreides. Paul, kid in bed. Right? We've all sat in bed and heard conversations outside. It's natural, naturalistic. He says Castle Caledon, Castle, England, British royalty, Duke Leto, right? Master of assassins. Just so much coming at you so fast. And with genuine interest, right? Because I've seen stories that just bring up, like, I don't know, random stuff. Stuff that sounds too fantastical. It's the wrong, what is it? It's the wrong word at the right time to veer me off track in a way the author didn't intend, and that I have to work as the reader to come back. He doesn't do that. He doesn't use the wrong words. He uses the right word. A Chome company. Capitalized. You don't always have capitalized words, but every time it's Chome, it's capitalized. These are, oh God, I can't think of the word. Where each letter means something. Y'all know what I mean. That sounds company, Chome company space, futuristic, some kind of conglomerate, some kind of thing, business oriented, money, Wall Street, financial gains. All this starts to play in my mind all at once. All at once. I hear the word House Atreides, which sounds Greek to me, which matches the water that we hear he describes raining. Water, Greek, castle. And then here's another thing. He calls his mom, her title is the Duke's concubine, which I feel like is one of these, when a royalty becomes entrenched, like, let's say one family has been ruling Russia for 700 years or some mess like that, right? Like an entrenched generational royalty. There's certain things start to fall off these people, right? Social norms become different. They become outside the normal parameters that society runs with. They're in a completely different world. These royalty. And in that, they start to, right, like, instead of cheating on the wife, right, which would they do in let's say early England. Then Henry the Fifth come along, and he's like, I'm just gonna divorce him. And like, you can't do that. You'll be excommunicated. The Pope doesn't allow divorce, and he's the fifth in law. He's the fifth generation of kings of England. He's not raised to care about that mess. He's just like, F the Pope. I'll make my own church, and that's what he does. Causes massive issues, right? So, but royalty, the rules start to change slowly over the generations for these people, and that's, like, to me, a sign of it, that you're no longer hiding that you have a concubine. Marriage has become so business, so politicized, that they're two different things now. That you would get married for monetary, for alliances. That's a tool of statecraft. And that, your heart or your passions would go some other place. And that you could openly say this and it not be insulting is a sign to me. It's a visualization, right? It's one of those things, one of those diction things that feeds me more story than even the words are telling, right? So I'm moving along fast and right. So essentially nothing's happened, but I'm completely intrigued because like I said, he's not. A lot of these stories, I say fantasy, sci-fi is the same, but normal stories will take time to describe what people wear or the landscape. Some people have a problem with that in Lord of the Rings. The landscape's always just described. That things you don't need to hear. Well, you do need to hear it, but they describe it in a way that pulls you this way, right? So it's a longer way versus the straight way, right? That all this, it's like I'm sitting in a cart and people are throwing stuff on the cart. I'm getting buried in information here, right? Buried in information. And then I noticed in review for this video, sort of what's the word I'm using? Not analogy. It's like a symbol. Nah, it's not symbolism. It's this. Oh my God. The book you read becomes the Paul Atreides sort of life, his story, all at once, right? Because at the start, I'm sitting here, and now I have multiple things very quickly that I care about, multiple storylines, right? And I'm at the nexus of it. And it could be any one of these things. We could follow the Reverend Mother. We could learn more about the Duke Leto. What is Gamja Bar? Who are Bene Gesserit? Early in, us readers can identify what's sort of the world, what's happening around us. I'm not going to read a book about space and Mars and expect to see a Sasquatch, right? It's not going to happen. I see it coming, and it's because the author shows me. He puts something down that I'm inclined to pick up, and then I enjoy that thing. Well, Frank puts down five worthy things for me to pick up, right? So I'm at this nexus of choices. Well, in the story that I'm reading, that happens to our hero, Paul Atreides. He ends up with that ability to see through time, and he's sitting at a nexus of choices, right? So the beginning of the book is like visualizing the end of the book at the same time as what's being described is the action that we're feeling, right? It's completely genius. It's completely genius. I didn't notice it the first or second time I read this thing. I didn't notice it after I listened to it. I only noticed it when I started breaking down the story itself and what was happening. It's completely genius. But at the same time, it's in the story, right, where it's the chaos of a move. We're moving from Caladan, the planet, to Arrakis. And so it's like on top of that I described, it's also in itself what it's supposed to be. Because our character is a little out of sorts as we are, because so much change is happening around him. So it's like three different things at once. It's actually genius. He's actually a genius, right? And it's so enjoyable if you are a reader, if you're someone who loves this medium, to consume this level of craft, right? So enjoyable. So then we get to the famous Gamja Bar Test, right? Iconic. Because on top of the ability for diction, he is able to think up and describe very interesting situations, and he puts that imagery in your head very well. And part of it, I think, is that the world building's so strong and dense that you can't help, you want to know, right? And that want makes you put the effort into the descriptors he's using for these events. And they sear into your brain so strongly because that want is built up, right? But the Gamja Bar Test, it's she puts a needle to his neck. He's 14. She puts a needle to his neck and puts his hand in a box. The box is going to be massive amounts of pain, and if he moves, he gets stabbed. And if he moves his hand, he gets stabbed and dies, right? It's a rough test for a 14-year-old, but he passes. But on top of this interest, what I like about it, is the A. She spills some history here, right? Because he asks what the test is for, and she says to prove you're a human, which it was an odd thing for me to read. I'm like, human? Doesn't he look like a human? But she doesn't seem like an idiot, right? She doesn't come across in the story when she's introduced or before this test, which is just a few pages, as an idiot. So I don't think she's stupid. That was a dumb answer. My brain instantly turns to trying to find an intellectual reason for that answer, right? So I'm charged looking for an intellectual reason, and then she gives it to me. She says something about the past where machines sort of ran people, where we thought we were letting machines work for us, and instead they were ruling us, right? And there's some allusion to a sort of a war, which is just fascinating. It's like to be in a world and to feel their history, right? So something happened in their past, right? This action happens, then it's done, then we live with the consequences. Those consequences are affecting our characters in the moment, right? To have all that feeling in one sentence is incredible. But you feel that something happened with machines that makes it so societally they're off limits in a kind of a way, right? And it's incredible. But on top of it, right? The world he sets up makes everything feel scientific rather than witchcraft, right? So, they talk about the voice, and this is an ability the Bene Gesserit sisters develop. And again, without saying all of this, you get a sense that because we're in the future, from where we are now, if I took certain things and gave them 1,000 or 2,000 years worth of study, what would I have? Let me give you an example. There are some people who are behavioral behavioral analysts. That's the word. Where they'll watch footage of someone who's accused of a crime and try and determine if they committed this crime, right? Are they a psychopath? Are they lying? This kind of thing. Dr. Phil did this. He helped Oprah pick a jury with just his schooling in psychology and as watching body language. He would say, this person might vote against you, that person might vote for you. He helped her pick her jury, and of course she won her case. Yeah, she won her case. Beef people. Beef people sued Oprah. It's actually real. But imagine taking that idea of being able to use psychology, use body language analysis, and study it religiously for 1,000 or 2,000 years, right? And teach year after year, generation after generation from the age of 4 up to adulthood, techniques for seeing if someone's lying, right? And then that's what he does. He has it so that they can see a lie. He has these sisters have full body control so they could like give you a cold if they wanted because they can feel the diseases in them and turn them on and off, so to speak, spread or not spread. He they can with resonance control you with their voice, right? Because wavelengths enter your ear like a hypnotist, but with practice, with 1,000 years of practice, right? So he introduces all these things, and they all have a scientific angle to them, a lean. So none of it feels like witchcraft. And on top of this, and added to what he introduced about machines, he introduces what they call a mentat. This is someone dedicated like them to a skill, only the skill is to be human computers, right? And the Duke has one of these. All the important people have a mentat. They probably are rare. They're probably expensive, but they're available. And it just fills this world with these possibilities, right? And your mind fires thinking through these possibilities and how in the future we are. And I love it. I absolutely love it. It's so meaty. So then he introduces then the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Again, another one of these great dictions for us. Barons. That's European, maybe Russian sometimes. Vladimir. Everyone knows of Vladimir, right? You know at least one from old Ruski land. But Harkonnen, now for you, maybe it's something, but for me in little old Texas, Harkonnen doesn't sound like anything, any place, maybe like a Poland, maybe? But the K, there's not a lot of K's out there, right? So to me, it's like blending that Russian feel with, I don't know, outer space or something, right? Because he establishes a new planet we're moving from Caladan to Arrakis, so space is floating up here, right? And because I'm reading the book and I want it to make sense, my brain attaches it up there to space. So there's Frank Herbert, because he threw space up there for me, right? All these ideas are floating because of him. It's like he knows where I'm going to hang each of these. And it's like he's world building in my head, without ever having met me. He's absolute genius. So, the Baron absolutely leaps off the page. He is described as having jade pink, cloud milk diamonds, and a gold globe inlaid with platinum, right? So you get a sense from him of power, of cunning, of malice. He's this big fat guy who needs this sort of technology to hover because he can't even stand on his legs. It's just this, like a baron, like an old, this over bloated, money grubbing, deadly thing, right? And it has a twin visual, right, to the like sort of the oil barons who were so rich they were out of this world. It's a great metaphors work in so many different ways. He turns out to be the arch forever nemesis of the Atreides, of Duke Leto Atreides. He's trying to kill him. He wants to kill him. But why, right? And then that leads to the next just really wonderful, wonderful part of the book. He has all this great world building, right? So you're primed. He could plant whatever he wants in this sort of fertile soil. And what he plants is politics. And at first it seems boring, right? I don't care about politics. It doesn't faze me. It's not even real. But because the world building's so deep, so rich, the politics, which is what politics needs. It needs you have to understand the actions of the people involved, why they're doing what they're doing, for politics to be interesting. If you just catch it on a whim, you're never going to be interested. It's too much in its own weeds, right? So the fact that you understand so much of his story, it's fertile ground for politics to grow and interestingly in your mind, which it does. The politics he's setting up, you're extremely interested in. On top of sort of the danger that this character is providing for the characters you already like, the Atreides. He's the threat, and here's how they navigate the threat: politics, right? So the politics of this world is a three-legged stool, right? Any one leg goes, that's chaos. On the one hand, we have the Emperor, right? The Emperor and his legendary Sardaukar, one of the all-time greatest names in any sci-fi book, Sardaukar. So cool. His elite warriors. Then we have the great houses. I think they call it the Landstrid. And these are like, a Baron Harkonnen, a Duke Atreides. These are people who've come up in the history of this world to power and are given. I'm assuming like our dukes, you get land, monies. You're required then to provide armies for the emperor when he needs it. On and on we go. So in the future, this has become entrenched. We have a certain number of great houses. I'm sure there's all kinds of infighting, which is probably why this Baron wants to take out this Atreides, right? And then the third leg is the Spacing Guild. They call them the Guild. And these are the people who, with the use of the spice, are able to traverse space at whatever hyperspeed, right? They're the only ones who can do it. They've monopolized this. Anyone who has the ability, because you take in a certain amount of spice and you can sort of see the future. So they use that to see where, asteroids and crap are going to be to avoid them. That's the only way you can do it. That's sort of the setup. So, they don't have an army. They don't have any weapons. They don't need any weapons. They can just, boycott you. And then none of you're on an island by yourself. No trade with the outside world, no money, no nothing. You'll eventually die on the vine, right? So that's how they. But if the other two gank up on them, they could be destroyed, right? Yeah, you shoot yourself in the foot, but you still take them out. So it's this tenuous balance, and into this balance comes the Baron Harkonnen. He and his family had been running Arrakis for 80 years. Just Arrakis is the only planet with spice. Spice is the most wanted commodity in space. It's the only place you can get it, and they were running it. They had a monopoly on it, and they're pilfering out the pot, right? So they've been getting rich for 80 years, and he's not about to lose that swag, especially not to his rivals, the Atreides. So he's setting a trap, right? And in this, we get a bit of the Hitchcockian tension, right? Wherein you put, what is the thing where he puts a bomb in a briefcase, and then he puts the briefcase under the table. And then our actors come and they're having a normal conversation, but we're not really listening to the conversation. We're wondering if that bomb is ticking, if they're gonna go, right? So the tension just carries. And the tension of his attack, his trap, carries when we continue hearing about the Atreides, right? So what is this trap? His trap is a traitor, one, Dr. Yu, who's supposed to be an uncrackable doctor, right? He's supposed to have this secret training that makes him unable to be a traitor, which you would need if you have if you have like 12 royal families and they need medical care. You got to be able to trust your doctor. So, first thing, he's cracked one of these. And if word got out, it could be some chaos. But the second and the bigger problem, the bigger secret, is he's gotten the Emperor to give him some Sardaukar forces to help him fight the Atreides. And they'll be disguised as Harkonnen. So no one will see that they're Sardaukar. But if anyone found out, there could be a civil war. Because the other houses aren't going to sit around and let the Emperor team up with the Harkonnens to take out one of the other houses. Then any one of them could be victimized the same way. They'd have to have a war right then. They'd use what they'd call the family atomics and start making some damage happen, right? So it's something that could crack the delicate balance. But he's still going for it because he's a big time gambler and that's what he does. What else do I got? Hold on. Okay. Another of the great ideas that's introduced is sort of the like bloodlines, right? And not just I'm related to the king. The way they see it, it's the blood is like our lizard brain, right? It's these animal instincts that come and go. And in the same way we can control a river with a dam or block the wind and then leave a hole and divert the wind, these Bene Gesserit believe that they can control the blood because they say that, like, let's say people in France marry French people. Well, if you keep marrying it, and again, we're bouncing it out to 1,000, 3,000 years. If you just only married French people, eventually it's inbreeding, and then eventually it's the end. There's no more advancement. They say that the blood knows it needs the genetic diversity, and that it points unannounced, right, like a wildfire. It'll burst, and there will be these wars, and the wars intermingle blood, and then we'll settle and we'll have it again. So rather than that, they want to control this force of the blood. And so they will, on purpose, because they have this ability, they intermingle the blood in ways that they want. Right? And that's a big meaty concept. Because I've heard I don't know where I heard it, where people, I think the Indians will say this too, where they have ancestral memories, right? Of past lives, or they say they're such and such reborn. This kind of thinking, right? I'm imagining, just in theory, that you grab that thinking, you apply science to it, and then you apply study, effort, and science, and 1,000 years, or 2,000 years, and who knows what we're looking at. But it's a great, meaty, bite that he takes down. He goes for the big ideas. Big, conceptually difficult to verbalize. And he sticks to landing. He sticks to landing for most parts. We're then introduced to their style of fighting. We've already heard about the family atomics. And so you're like, well, how do you go to war? And the way they do war is with swords or knives, right? They say knives, but I think they're sizable, right? Like a short sword almost, a long knife maybe. And the idea of this is also genius, where you put on a personal force field, a personal shield. And so if I put this shield on and you shoot me with a gun, the bullets come too fast and then they bounce off. I'm bulletproof. Tank rounds are too fast. All the normal stuff, right? If an explosion happens, the wave's too fast, it deflects it. So in order to fight someone, another soldier, another person trained to fight, you have to, fight them quick because people react, but then go slow at the last second and cut them or stab them, right? And to me, I'm like, can you imagine having to box someone and just before you hit them, you have to slow down? I mean, they'd move, they'd react. It makes their fighting highly complex. And I love that as a concept, right? In some stories, guns can be boring, so it's good to find a way to get away from them. But to add this sort of ancient swordplay, but with this wicked twist of slowing down and these force fields, it makes for such a great setup. I can imagine 10,000 dudes trying to stab each other with force fields on, right? And you got to go slow. I mean, it'd be impossible. But dudes would find a way, right? Okay, so then we sort of meet the Duke Leto. And you would think all this setup, is he just an idiot? No. Him and his family kind of are aware. Their popularity is rising, so they think that's why the Emperor's against them. They know the Harkonnens are. And they know some kind of trap, some kind of not good thing will be waiting for them on Arrakis. And so Paul asks what you would ask. Why are we going to go if there's a trap? And the dad, because it's his son and he will be Duke one day, doesn't sugarcoat it, right? He lays it out. It's dangerous. It's pretty bad. But he says that if you know there's a trap, it's easier to avoid. And I'm like, man, in that sense he's right. If you know there's a trap, like I know I have to step on a bear trap, I put, metal sheets and bars on my legs so the teeth can't get me, right? You do something to not get got. What they do, some of it, what they do is they spy out, right? They spy out the opposition. And then their thinking is if there's a transfer of power on Arrakis, and then there's some kind of war on Arrakis, that could interrupt the supply of spice. So therefore, if any of the great houses are stockpiling spice, they will be the ones involved in trying to take us, the Atreides, out. I mean, that sounds reasonable because if you know it's coming, you stockpile to counteract the bad of not having the supply. And the only two houses they find are the Emperor and the Harkonnens, which the Harkonnens they'd know, the Emperor they're pretty sure, and that leads them to think, because he can't publicly fight them, that he'll send Sardaukar in disguise, right? So they have this idea, they know this big attack's coming from two powerful enemies, right? But then he also thinks through, and he explains this to his kid, about the Sardaukar, about how they're so good at fighting. Now, the official story is that he gets volunteers or whatever and just trains them. But the dad brings up something called Solsa Secundus? Secluda Secundus? I may have said it wrong. Something Secundus. It's a prison planet. And their theory is that he lets the prison planet just run rampant, lawless, deadly. And that any men or women who are strong enough to rise up in this sort of maelstrom, he then handpicks out of there and groups up and makes armies out of just these men, right? And that he has a whole planet of it just churning out these soldiers. Then would be, and you're like, how do you make them loyal? And again, they use the psychology, the what is it, like Pavlov science, only mutated out 1,000 years to get these people to then bind themselves to the Emperor, and now you have a loyal fighting force. Well, the dad, the Duke Leto, theorizes that the planet Dune, Arrakis, is the same thing as that prison planet. It's such a harsh environment that if anyone can survive there, they could, in theory, be hardened warriors, right? Hardened enough to survive. You'll be able to find a way to fight, right? Find a way to win. They would be tough, and there'd be a lot of them. So in his head, and he sent sort of advanced parties. In his head, if he could get these freemen, these people who live in the desert, to join the Atreides, he'd have a force equal enough to hold both of them off, maybe more, right? So I have a force that can hold off my enemies. I now have control of the spice. I'm like, his ship is just rising. He will become more popular, and the ones he's not popular with, he can force to an alliance. He'll be head of the Chome Company in no time, and that's the goal. Just if you ain't first, you're last, right? It's that, or take his family and flee into the void, which they say is an option. Which to me is also very interesting. To think a whole race of people, like let's say, well, the Jews, right? They always trying to get the Jews. Imagine if all the Jews said, rather than get dead by Hitler, let's all just leave to Dakota. Only Dakota's the new world, and we don't know it exists, right? So I'm imagining these families just leaving and finding new planets and sort of establishing themselves. It's like the wilderness, but with technology. You could have an entire second imperial, setup out in the void that's not part of this one, right? And I can imagine, invade that one. All this kind of action could happen. But it's just a possibility. It's one of many possibilities. We don't go into it. But it fires the mind, right? And it makes you interested. He then introduces a concept called the Missionaria Protection. Again, it sounds Latin, sounds religious, and that's what it is. In times past, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe more, the Bene Gesserit sisters of those times sent someone to Arrakis. They sent him to a bunch of planets, but they did send one to Arrakis with, like the religion came to the New World and we started trying to convert Indians to Catholicism, right? That had whatever effect it had on those people. Their idea would be to do it on purpose, not not to be religious. They see religion as a tool of statecraft. So you bring a religion to these people on Arrakis. You feed them prophecies that you can easily fulfill yourself 1,000 years from now. They're not born yet. You have no idea. But you're like, if we stay as an organization, in 1,000 years, one of us could be, you know, the savior of this land and have all these people listen to us. And in that sense, strength, power. But the idea to write that in a story of a group of people who would use religion scientifically, right, to almost brainwash people to know certain primitive types were more likely to lean towards a sun god or this and that, right? And to use select words to funnel them where you want. That's the idea of this, and it's actually genius. And it's great that he put it in the book, right? It fits every other thing that they do, all the other setups they have. I mean, what is it? They have a propaganda unit, right? And just to say it casually, it means it's so ingrained. It's like you wouldn't say, I have a water committee. I'm like, yeah, they cover the water. A road committee covers the road, and they're my propaganda committee. And here's my master assassin. I'm like, you have a master assassin? Can you imagine if Nancy Pelosi had a master assassin? We're like, what the crap, bro? You can't be killing people. Well, they're 1,000 years past caring about stabbing people. It's just accepted. The level of things accepted are incredible. We get a little sense as to the Duke's sort of job, a day to day, And it's kind of like seeing a president, right, behind the scenes. He has these, right, problems that persist around the world. I need to turn this whole planet into this spice mining factory. But I have problems with equipment. I have little Harkonnen rebellions popping up. I have workers trying to quit, workers who know how to run the equipment that I need them to stay because I need to make my next quota. Someone tried to kill my kid. A lot of things coming at the Duke. And it's interesting that we take time to present his work. He doesn't just say he's a Duke and he struts around. They're nuts and bolts things he does. He goes out and he tries to witness the spice mining. They see one of the great worms, another of the great visuals of the story. These massive worms that can, I don't know, eat a house-sized factory. Just eat it. Right? And again, a lot of what I'm describing may not sound as interesting, just laid out, right? Like his job. But when you read through, right, like a steak at a 5-star Michelin restaurant's better than just a steak at your house because it's better quality, it's made better. When you actually just read the story, it's so fulfilling. And in that sense, he turns a dinner party into high politics and intrigue, right? You would think a dinner party, that's boring, politics is boring. It isn't. At one point he has, let's see who comes over. He has a dinner party because, you and I have a dinner party. We eat and we chat. But when you're royalty, everything's work, right? So he invites, who does he invite? A steel suit manufacturer. They need to wear suits to capture the water when they're out in the heat. Electronics importer, a water shipper who, breaks up polar ice caps. They're little, but they're there. A replacement part dealer. He has an escort service, which is another like the Missionaria Protectia. That's something that we would look down on, is casual to them. Escorts are casual. That's just a thing you have. So much so that it's not even an escort service. It's just masquerading as one, and it actually is a smuggling / blackmailing service. But that's too much for them, right? They can't say they openly blackmail people. So, I'm an escort. Wild. Just the level of their politics. And he uses this dinner to establish control over these people or fear to some that I can't control. I'll have to find out who those are and destroy them to see how hard it'd be to destroy them. This is the action of this dinner party. It's highly intriguing. And this is real life, right? In real life, the King of England had to deal with, the Duke of Reading or whatever, right? He had to deal with that guy because he owns so much land, and I'm not going to be able to tend in sheep. He tends the sheep and pays me. We build an army when I say, but I have to listen to him because those are his guys. On and on we go, right? It's like that, only with his setup. Then the trap closes. This is very sad. This is very sad because ye old Duke dies, and you liked him. You liked the Duke. But what he does is he double crosses the whole Harkonnen. He implants a tooth into the Duke that when he bites down, he can breathe out, kill everyone in the room. Right? Because he knows the Duke's going to be, the Baron is going to be so pompous that he want to lord over the Duke before he, lets him die. But the Doctor kind of messes up. So they instantly stab him because he's a traitor, and the Baron is smart. He says, you never trust a traitor. Just kill them once they're not useful. But with his dying breath, he says some ominous stuff, and the Baron then feels weird about it. So he turns on his shield, right? So when he comes close and he hears the tooth get bit, his shield's up, which stops the poison, and then his sort of suspender suit flies him away to safety, as far in the room as he can get. Everyone else dies. His mentat dies. His head of security dies. He's lost some pieces. He sort of freaks out. He's like, "Oh man, that was close." Sort of what he says. But it's sad, and you kind of wish he'd die, but he doesn't. Then we have. Hold on. Does it happen here? Then we have Paul, right, and his mom, the Lady Jessica, are captured and flown out to be killed. They escape because she uses the voice and whatnot. It's interesting to read. But they escape. He spends his first night out in the desert, and he has an influx of spice. And this influx triggers that specific genetics that he had, that the Bene Gesserit sisters were building up to. And it's called. They think he's going to be the Quasat Haderach. Don't know if I said that right. Again, it's one of these weird words that sparks the mind. And it's related to the blood again. That they can see through and ahead in the past and the future. But they can't see men, right? They can only, they're women. They only have the women's blood. And they want to make a man who can. And they think they've done it. And then he thinks he's done it too, sort of. Because this spice gets him in that nexus we were talking about at the very beginning. He's at the precipice of every option around him, right? He sees things that have happened. He knows things of the past. He has this heightened awareness. And then we get a bit of a plot twist, a little Luke, I am your father moment, because he says that he and his mom are related to they're Harkonnens. And it's horrifying to her that she's the daughter of the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, right? She's the daughter. The daughter had married the Duke Atreides, the most hated one. It's like a twisted Romeo and Juliet or something, right? And she's horrified. But then he has this heightened awareness. And then he does a thing I wish more authors would do. He ends book 1 and starts book 2. It's what how they have a break. Some people just say new chapter. He says book 2, Muad'Dib. I'm like, why is this important? And it's that same use of diction. The first story is more of the Duke's story, right? As much as it's Paul, the main effect on him is his father, the Duke. So when that element's gone, all the levels of it, right? The love of the father, the fears, the dramaticness of the attack don't matter anymore because the character that it mattered to is gone. Even the fact that she's a Harkonnen is now in the past. The one who would have cared, the Duke, is gone, right? So you end that story. And rather than let it drag into the rest of the story, you have a clean break and you start a new book. And in that new book, there are different levels. So, when other elements, you don't have to keep track of other elements. You don't have to balance those elements with your new elements. Because it's a new book, right? It has its own balance. It's very smart. And in this book, he does another thing that I really like. He doesn't forget that Paul Atreides is 14, right? A lot of books, once the character's established, the author gets a little ahead of himself. He likes his character and he wants to put a lot on him. He doesn't do this. Frank Herbert doesn't do this. Instead, a lot of book 2 is the strength of Lady Jessica. Her ability, her knowledge, her strength is what gets her and her son through the desert. She relies on him in points, right? He can fly this ornithopter better than I can. He's a better pilot. He's had that training. I haven't. But then in the use of the voice, in dealing with other cultures, she takes the lead, right? She's carrying him through. And in that sense, it's the second book's hers. First is the father, second's the mother, right? It's very smart to make that break for the reader. It sort of allows the Paul character to mature a little, right? We have this time. Our other main characters that we liked. Duncan Idaho dies. Very sad. Not happy about this. Very cool name. Gurney Halleck is a soldier, one of these top soldiers. And Thufir Hawat, I think I said that right. Thufir Hawat, he survives. He's captured by the Harkonnen, who needs a Mentat, so he tricks him into thinking the lady is the traitor. He knew one of them was, but the lady's the traitor. And Gurney thinks they're all dead, so he just wants to kill Harkonnens. And what this does is it lets characters we like not leave the story. They're orbiting, right? They're just in this casual orbit. We know what they're doing, but it's repetitive. And it has no bearing on our current story, which is Paul and his mom meeting the Freeman, integrating, right? So they're just orbiting. So he's able to keep the characters we like in our memory without wasting time, so to speak, on what they're doing. Because they're established, we know what they do. One's going to try and kill Harkonnens. The other has his own plans, right? Again, probably not in the benefit of Harkonnens, but and then it ends, I think, in book three. Book three is called Muad'Dib. We're now with Paul's the main character. His actions are paramount. The mom is sort of pushed to the side. Naturally, as naturally would happen. We get another look into this memories, right, of the blood. She gets the lady Jessica undergoes a test where she becomes a reverend mother, and then she sees what that process means, and it's that not just that you see the past and this and that, but you can like all the lives you're living at once, right? You have access to those memories and experiences like they're yours. And he doesn't just, right? So it's important and it's impressive that he describes it. But having opened the door to these ideas, he then takes the step to walk into them, right? So if I invent a dinosaur in a story, then I'm also able to play with that invention, right? What would it be like if a dinosaur, ate a truck? That's the fun I get to have because I invented this thing. He put pen to paper and gave us these these ancestral memories, right? So then he puts those memories into a child, right? Because Lady Jessica was pregnant at the time with Duke Leto's daughter. He puts those into a child, all this ancestral memory. Imagine having the memories of countless adults when you're an infant, right? She's fully aware instantly all the time, but in a child's body. It makes for some pretty cool interactions, but it's also interesting to think about, right? He's giving you something to think about. Oh, did I miss something? No, I don't think I missed something. Uh, then the ending comes, the high dramatic ending where it all comes boiling out. Paul Atreides sort of bends all of it to his will, right? The whole lot of it. The guild because these things have been building. The guild, because of their spice use, can see the wall at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. They understand something's going to happen. Oh, my butt hurts. They're going to understand. They see a point in the future that they can't see past, and they know Paul's involved. So they're interested in Arrakis. They can't find him. They're not used to that. The Emperor comes because he's been losing Sardaukar like crazy on this planet, and he needs to concoct some reason to fully send the full all his legions in to wipe out the Freemen. He can't have a pocket of people who could resist his strength, the Sardaukar. And the houses come because it involves the spice, right? He's going to concoct some mess. So the houses in the guild get off, they get shipped out quickly because Paul threatens to wipe out the spice if they don't leave. And Gilda knows they're addicted. Maybe no one else does, but Paul knows and they know, so they have to bend to his will. He then, of course, exposes the emperor, but rather than a civil war, he's just like, I'll marry your daughter for, political reasons. I don't love her or anything like this. I love my wife. I'll marry your daughter for the status, and I'll become the emperor, right? And so he clears them off the board. And then you get a sense that, because the Bene Gesserit they would want him to control him, but he's like, you're never going to control me. I'm going to be the emperor. And I think she sort of sees that he's going to unleash the Freemen, right? Because he sees the problem that they saw, that the genetics need to mingle. Only he's going to do it in a way they wouldn't have done it. And the book sort of ends like that, with him sitting pretty, right? It's a great ending to a book. I won't go into the other books. What I will say, I'll only warn you that, the main author, Frank Herbert, wrote, I think, 6 of these books, or 5. He does die before he finishes the series. I mean, if you're a completionist, and that's an issue for you, maybe you want to skip this book. What I would say, as someone who loves reading, read it anyway. At least this first one, right? Maybe any of them written by Frank Herbert. You'll be left wanting, like I was when I first read them years ago. I was very upset that I wasn't going to get to finish them. Now I think I'm over it. Now I think I'll read even what his son wrote. I don't mind. But then I was upset. I want it from the horse's mouth. But it's so good. It's such meaty, enriching writing that it's worth the read for anyone. I'll say that. Even if that's something that would scare you away, don't let it. It's really worth it. But I wouldn't recommend it to all my, normie friends. They're not about it. They can't handle it. It'll be lost on them, right? Okay, let me see. How long was this video? How long? All right. Last time I did it, I think I went an extra 30 minutes, but I had too many pauses. I lost my train of thought too much. I didn't like it. I'm going to leave a little bit of time here so y'all can look at my books and be, motivated to buy them with latinum. Give me that latinum, right? It's not wrong to ask, is it? Ask for loot? Open the loot box? All right. Hope you enjoyed. I'll be back with another book sometime next week.